Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video we're taking a look at a triple buffed Pokemon from the Season 26 Balance Patch, and that is the triple buff to Gliscor. Gliscor's fast move of Wing Attack just got extra energy generation, its bait move of Sand Tomb just got a ton more damage, and it just got a brand new nuke move in Acrobatics. We know from when Gligar terrorized the Great League that being a ground flying type, it is a pretty incredible typing defensively, so I'm very excited to see what Gliscor can do in the Open Great League. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and let's go Gliscor. Hopping into the first match, picking up a pretty nice lead Gliscor into Annihilate. My opponent safe switches into Shadow Drapion, and I'm able to get the catch and sneak of the Aqua Tail onto Empoleon. Drapion has very high incentive to try and fire off the Aqua Tail instantly there, because if they don't, then they just get outpaced and Gliscor makes the Sand Tomb. So we're able to punish the fact that Drapion feels a lot of pressure to throw immediately in that matchup, get the catch, and by getting the sneak as well, it just puts me really far ahead in this matchup. My opponent does get the Crunch debuff, but they try and CMP tie while only having an Aqua Tail. I'm very okay letting this go. Even though I am already at -1, I can now farm up to the back-to-back Hydro Cannons, and these Hydro Cannons are going to be deadly. Drapion does get knocked out, back in comes the Annihilate. The one thing I don't want to do is concede a farm down. So after the Drill Peck lands, I'm just going to pivot back into the Gliscor. The Annihilate does have enough energy for a potential Ice Punch. Typically, it won't run Ice Punch, but in case they were, I did not want to lose my Gliscor, so I put up the shield, and they reveal their final Pokemon is Lickitung. Acrobatics, look at the speed of Gliscor. With this energy head start, I'm already at Acrobatics number 2. This is going to be knocking out the Lickitung unless they give me their final shield. And non-Shadow Gliscor does have the ability to survive a Shadow Ball here pretty comfortably, so as they fire off the Shadow Ball, that's just not going to be a problem. I try for a catch onto Empoleon. I am unsuccessful in my catch attempt, but I'm still able to get them to throw energy. They end up firing off a Shadow Ball there. They pivot into Annihilate, hoping for a catch that they're not going to get. And in game number 1, Gliscor energy just completely took over this game. Acrobatics takes down Lickitung, and that's a good game. Hopping into game number 2, picking up a bit of an awkward lead Gliscor against Altaria. Altaria will outpace by 1 turn, so I'm actually going to go for the catch and sneak onto Empoleon. I'm very much expecting my opponent is going to look to rebank energy and try and catch a Drill Peck onto their own Empoleon, so I'm just going to never throw my move. This is a fun fact, your opponent can never catch your charge attack if you do not throw it. So I was fully content farming past 100 there, because I knew at some point they were going to send in their Empoleon, and the moment they did, I wanted to be able to fire off the Hydro Cannon. By not letting my opponent catch, I'm able to make the back-to-back-to-back Hydro Cannons in very short order. Hydro Cannon number 2 is going to get them low, and Hydro Cannon number 3 will secure the knockout. I'm going to look to try and pivot back into the Gliscor though, because I would much rather just try and keep Gliscor at an energy advantage, rather than making life awkward and conceding a massive farm down. Because Drapion in the back, it's an amazing Pokemon, but it really does not like Altaria. I full send the Acrobatics, that connects, and in the back my opponent has their own Drapion. And Gliscor is just going to be such a nuisance here. Sand Tomb does so much more damage this season. Sand Tomb, even from a non-Shadow Gliscor, is suddenly a real move when it hits for super effective damage. Now, I can just keep spamming away at these Sand Tombs. Their defense is now going to be at -2 momentarily. I'm going to look to pivot into the Drapion and save the Gliscor. My Drapion actually does end up winning the charge attack priority tie, and this is going to pressure their final shield. Their switch clock should be up momentarily, so after firing off the Aqua Tail, they can look to send in the Altaria. Altaria will be able to outpace. I'm not going to get a farm down, but I should still be in a winning position. Gliscor will be able to wing attack down. The threat of a Sand Tomb is going to force them to throw instantly, and they're so low on this Drapion already that I should just be able to Metal Sound down with the Empoleon and take the win. So Aqua Tail is going to be knocking out Gliscor, but in comes Empoleon. The game got a little bit close, but Empoleon able to get the win. Great lead in the next match, Gliscor into Forretress. This is a Volt Switch Forretress as well. Either fast move, Gliscor was going to do very well, but it is cool to see Volt Switch on Forretress. I go for the Sand Tomb. Honestly, it wasn't even really a bait. I just wanted to apply an early debuff before they Rock Tombed me. Because now, my attack is basically going to be at normal power. So this is just going to be a full power Acrobatics due to the -1 attack, but the -1 to their defense. That knocks out the Forretress, in comes Poliwrath. I'm expecting them to Icy Wind instantly, so I actually make a very risky play, and I catch out of Gliscor, catching the Icy Wind where it's double resisted onto the Empoleon. Empoleon doesn't really have a lot of fast move pressure here. I'm debuffed as well, so when I fire off the Drill Peck, Poliwrath will be able to hang on. But I wanted to preserve the Gliscor, because if they're bringing a Poliwrath with Mud Shot into Gliscor, I really feel like they just don't have a great answer to Gliscor whatsoever. So I bring back in the Gliscor. They do have the Icy Wind loaded, so I will put up the shield. And now my opponent is going to reveal their final Pokemon, that is Annihilape. Annihilape is going to be Sand Tomb baited. The threat of an Acrobatics will force the shield. They should fire off the Rage Fist instantly, and when they do, we get the catch onto the Shadow Drapion. Drapion more than happy to absorb that damage, and here I think my winning play is just to fire off the Aqua Tail. Aqua Tail is going to do some pretty nice chip damage onto the -1 Annihilape. They put up the shield, and now, as long as I don't shield the Rage Fist, I should be in a winning position, so I just let it go. If I end up no shielding a close combat, I'm fine. My opponent makes a catch onto Poliwrath, which is a very nice play, but I still just have a bunch of energy on the Gliscor. So I undercharge, snipe down with the wing attack, and exit with the Acrobatics loaded. Man, Gliscor is just a ton of fun. Acrobatics, taking the knockout, and securing the win. Picking up a pretty neutral lead in the next match, Gliscor into Lickitung. Now, Lickitung is just very neutrally bulky, and that can make it a little bit awkward for this team. Body Slam is going to land. I'm not quite sure what to go for here, so I try for a Body Slam catch, and unfortunately, that is unsuccessful as in comes Annihilape. Annihilape with low kick, extremely spammy. Now, the thing that I'm not sure of is if a Rage Fist will actually secure the KO. I assume it will, so I will put up the shield. My hope is that I'm going to get back to my switch timer, because if I can, I have an entire Acrobatics loaded, and I can snipe down the Annihilape. It's going to be close. Can I escape? No, I cannot. I get farmed down. I send in the Drapion as my opponent is going to be blind firing off the Rage Fist. Rage Fist still does quite a lot of damage. I send in the Gliscor, and unfortunately, I end up playing to a CMP tie that I do not win. I should have just fired off the Acrobatics instantly, but I wanted to try and save some energy, but man, that Annihilape, the decision to pivot out of that matchup, really ended up backfiring on me. I definitely think that if I just stayed in the matchup with Gliscor and played it out, it could have gone quite a bit better. In comes Corsola. I go for a Sand Tomb into an Acrobatics, just trying to get as much damage as I can, but I think I've just misplayed this game. Failing that catch put me in a really awkward spot. I'm able to switch into the Shadow Drapion. Due to the debuff, I should be able to get a Poison Sting down, but unfortunately the damage is done. I don't have a crunch, and even if I did, the Lickitung is just simply too healthy. So, in this matchup, I think if I saw Lickitung next time, I would just stay in the matchup and play it out, because banking the energy and going into the Empoleon didn't end up working out super well. We get the worst case lead in the next match, leading Gliscor into Articuno. I save switch into Drapion, fire off the crunch, and my opponent gets a catch and sneak onto Wigglytuff. But this is not really a matchup that Wigglytuff likes to be in. So this works out very nicely for me as the Drapion player, because Drapion should be able to either force both shields or force switch advantage, and if I get switch advantage, Articuno is going to meet a brick wall in Empoleon. Aqua Tail sets up a Poison Sting farm down for the Drapion, in comes Articuno, and I'm just going for damage, so I full send the Crunch. Crunch is shielded up by the Articuno, no Crunch debuff. I'm going to try and make an Aqua Tail. It looks like it would have been very close if I could have got there or not, but my opponent did not want to risk it, so they threw Icy Wind. In comes Empoleon, these metal sounds adding up. My opponent tries for a catch onto Jellicent, and unfortunately, Jellicent is a Pokemon that this team is ABA weak to. I send in the Gliscor. Even with my Gliscor IVs not being the greatest, I will be able to survive the Surf, and now it's a pretty tough judgment call. I decide to full send. I'm going for the Acrobatics. Acrobatics, massive damage onto the Jellicent. Jellicent tries to farm down, but they're unable to do so. Gliscor makes the Sand Tomb. This should force the shield. In comes Empoleon. I fire off this Hydro Cannon, and my opponent's switch timer was just not up. Hydro Cannon knocks out the Jellicent, and with Jellicent gone, there's just no path forward for my opponent. Articuno does not have a coverage move into the Steel types. Hurricane lands. That does do some pretty substantial damage, but it's not enough. Empoleon strikes back, taking the knockout, and getting the win. Unfortunately, we get back-to-back Articuno leads, and that is really not what I'm hoping to see. I end up save switching into Drapion. My opponent responds with Swampert, and this is when I remember that Drapion does not win charge attack priority against Swampert. For some reason, I was misremembering it, and I thought that Drapion won the cap tie, but it turns out that is definitely not accurate. I'm in a lot of trouble here. My opponent had a very tough matchup for my lead and a very tough matchup for my swap. However, I'm going to try and find a way to play out of it. So I'm going to farm up, switch into Empoleon, and catch the Hydro Cannon. If I'm going to win this game, it starts with having a lot of energy on the Drapion. My Empoleon is answered with a Jellicent, and unfortunately, my opponent has basically perfect counters for me. However, somehow, I still don't think I'm out of this game. Winning this game would probably require an actual miracle, but I'm not going to give up quite yet. I will get knocked out by the Shadow Ball. I think my one path forward in this game is to try and get some Gliscor energy and absorb a Surf. This is going to remove a ton of HP off the Gliscor, but now I can send in the Drapion. Drapion has a ton of energy. I'm going to CMP tie here, Crunch to their Surf. Crunch should be enough to deliver a knockout onto the Jellicent, and my opponent will look to bring back in the Swampert. I'm not going to let the Swampert CMP tie me. Instead, I'm just going to shield and try and get as much residual energy as I possibly can. In comes the Articuno. I fire off the Crunch, and this will do quite a lot of damage. Crunch is going to connect onto the Articuno. Articuno fires off energy, and I realize that unfortunately, I just don't have enough energy on the Gliscor to win the game. In comes Gliscor. All I have is the Sand Tomb. I tried to play my way out, but unfortunately the alignment was just too unfavorable. Articuno Powder Snows down, and we will lose the game. We've got a very cool pick from my opponent in the next match, as I end up leading Gliscor into Gabite. While Gliscor is a triple buffed Pokemon, Gabite is double buffed in its own right, so Gabite is quite improved as well. I throw one, fire off the bait, going for the Sand Tomb, but my opponent catches onto Kangaskhan. So my opponent absolutely running some spice. This is a low kick Kangaskhan. I farm back up to the Acrobatics, baiting with a Sand Tomb, expecting my opponent to respect it, and they do. Now I'm going to send in Drapion, because Drapion should be able to absorb a Stomp. Then I realized at the last second, this thing can learn Earthquake. I shield at the 11th hour, and I'm so happy that I did, because I would have just lost my entire Drapion. Now I have a Drapion that's up energy and is basically full health, and that should serve me very, very well. My opponent reveals their final Pokemon is going to be Politoed. Politoed is back to straight 4 pacing on Weather Ball. The Weather Ball spam is real. My opponent is going to catch back onto Gabite, but Gabite is not the tankiest Pokemon around, and Crunch just deals absolutely devastating damage. This means that Drapion is already at another Crunch as Politoed hits the field. Crunch will get the Politoed low. Politoed is going to be no shielding, and now I send in the Gliscor. On the chance that this Politoed does have Earthquake, I need to try and get it as low as I possibly can. So I bring in the Gliscor, I shield, and I fire off the Sand Tomb. This is going to help me get extra fast move pressure onto this Politoed. They'll be able to knock out the Gliscor, but they're just too low and they're debuffed, which means I should actually be able to Metal Sound this down. In comes Empoleon. They make a last second charge attack, but unless I've made a severe counting error, it should just be the Weather Ball, and it is. We're able to survive a very spicy team from my opponent. We see the Core Breaker on the lead in the next match, Gliscor into Azumarill. I feel that a catch on 5 would be too obvious, so I'm going to farm up and catch on their 7th bubble, and we get the catch onto the Empoleon. That should put me in a pretty nice spot. Ice Beam going to do basically nothing. In comes a Shadow Gengar, and Shadow Gengar is a very, very scary Pokemon to deal with. Hydro Cannon is going to be shielded. Gengar can farm up to the back-to-back Shadow Punches, and now, if I want to shield the Empoleon, I have to double shield, so I may as well just let it go. I'm expecting my opponent is just going to blind Shadow Punch here, so my plan is just to send in the Drapion. This Drapion will be resistant to Shadow Punch, and then hopefully the Gliscor energy will be good endgame. Shadow Punch lands. I'm expecting my opponent to catch back onto the Azu, so I fire off the Crunch, anticipating that they would go for that catch. Crunch lands onto the Azu. I do not get the debuff, but I'm just going to stay in with the Drapion. My goal is hopefully to land a Crunch and then set up a Wing Attack down for the Gliscor. So I farm up a ton of energy, fire off the Crunch, and I'm hoping that this will put it into 3 Wing Attack range. I feel like this game is starting to slip out of my grasp. As the Crunch lands, it was not in 3 Wing Attack range. I'm forced to CMP tie with the Drapion, and now I've lost my entire Drapion, I've lost my energy head start, and in the back they have an Astonished Palisand. In the moment, I was very confused as to why they had a Palisand, and then I remembered, this has Sand Tomb. Astonished plus Sand Tomb, that is very, very oppressive. And my opponent, they're not even going to build up. They're just going to go straight for the Sand Tomb because they know that's going to win them this game. I make it to the Sand Tomb. My opponent gets a catch onto the Gengar, but realistically, I needed to throw a move at the Gengar anyway. It was just simply too healthy. In comes the Drapion, and I don't survive the Astonish. I was 1 off the Aqua Tail, so if I lived the Astonish, I had a chance, but unfortunately, we will lose that game. Hopping to the final match, picking up a pretty nice lead, leading Gliscor into Aegislash. Well, at least I assume it's a pretty nice lead. I haven't really played out this matchup. Sand Tomb will hit them for super effective damage and debuff them as well. My opponent will be firing off a charge attack, and I'm going to be putting up the shield. Aegislash just hits way too hard, so I'm always going to try and shield up. They go Shadow Ball. Oh my goodness, those wing attacks are doing huge damage to them after they switch forms, and I fire off the Sand Tomb, putting them at -2 defense. They save switch in a Jellicent. I'm just going to look to bank as much Gliscor energy as humanly possible and then send in the Shadow Drapion. Surf is going to be shielded, Drapion hits the field, and with that little bit of wing attack damage, that should put them in a range where I can knock them out with a crunch. That's why I stayed in. Not only is Gliscor energy just generally very good, but by getting a little bit of fast move damage, then I shouldn't need a second move on this Drapion. So crunch lands, Jellicent gets poison stung down, that worked out very nicely, and in comes Noctowl. Noctowl immediately under so much pressure because the Drapion is absolutely loaded. I fire off the crunch, I bank a crunch for later, and I send in Empoleon. Back in comes Aegislash. It does have quite a bit of energy, and that is scary because I have no shields remaining. The good news for me is Aegislash can basically never do any kind of fast move pressure, so even though Shadow Ball is going to hurt, they don't really have a lot of farm ability. They're going to fire off the Shadow Ball, Empoleon gets rocked, but I'm able to make the last second Hydro Cannon. This Hydro Cannon is going to be pressuring the shield away from the Aegislash as they put up the shield, and I send in Drapion to absorb their energy. Drapion is going to get knocked out here. The Aegislash animation is always very slow as they fire off the Shadow Ball. I send in Empoleon as they bring in the Noctowl, and that gave me a guaranteed win condition, whether they stayed or whether they swapped. Because now, I can just knock them out with Gliscor's Acrobatics and have a Sand Tomb loaded as they send back in the Aegislash. So that was a bit of a scary Pokemon to see in this final battle, but luckily, we are able to still get that win. All in all, I really liked Gliscor. I don't think Gliscor is going to break into a top meta contender spot, but I think Gliscor has moved from a pretty unusable Pokemon to now a spot where it's some pretty nice anti-meta. When it goes right for Gliscor, if you're able to get a Sand Tomb shielded, or if you're ever able to get up energy, same type attack bonus Acrobatics just hits incredibly hard. We saw this before when Jumpluff was a top meta contender. Acrobatics is just an incredibly strong move, and Gliscor is able to get to it at a pretty nice rate. With Gliscor, it's always going to be a bit high risk, high reward, and that's part of what holds it back from true meta contention. If you're able to play a one-shield scenario where you're able to get a Sand Tomb bait shielded into landing in Acrobatics, Gliscor is going to feel absolutely insane. But the reverse is also true. If you go for a Sand Tomb bait and they call it, then suddenly Gliscor feels a lot less effective. So its inconsistency holds it back from true meta contention, but it's an extremely fun Pokemon to play, and I really like it, where even if a Pokemon isn't going to be the most used Pokemon at every regional, if it's fun anti-meta, and if it's fun to use, and Gliscor was an absolute blast to use, then I'm a really big fan of these changes. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And an extra special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support guys provide is genuinely so appreciated, so thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.